Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Let me go ahead and share the meeting minutes / agenda. Can everyone see the share?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Oh, you're here, Frederick. Okay, excellent. I'll let you.
Yeah, the calendar fell off the event fell off my calendar, so I had to go fish it up. We should probably double check to see if the Google Calendar is still publishing, because I'm supposed to be subscribed to that. It could just be an issue with me, but we'll double check to make sure that everyone's still getting updates through the Google Calendar, or make another one if it isn't.
Excellent, got it.
Cool. So welcome to the Network Service Mesh meeting. This meeting occurs every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, and we also have a developer and PR issues call, which occurs every half hour before this one at 7:30 a.m. Pacific. We also participate in the CNCF Network Function Working Group, which occurs every Monday at 1600 UTC, and which is currently 8 a.m. Pacific. And we also participate in the CNCF Tag Network, which occurs every first and third Thursday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific. The details are in the agenda. We have a couple things coming up. We have Open Source Summit in North America, which is coming up in June 21st or 24th. The CFPs are currently open until March 14th. And we also have Cloud Native Telco Day, which is going to occur on May 16th in Europe, as part of a KubeCon EU event. CFPs are open until February 21st. So please submit if you are interested in speaking there. If you would like help, or you want some advice on what makes a good CFP, you can send a message out to me or Ed, or if you want, I can point you to other people as well who have also done reviews on this stuff, and we're happy to give advice. We have been publishing a variety of information on the social media community team. We now have we've added additional 2 followers and are following 35 more people, and have published 10 messages on various current events that are going on in the CNCF and NSM world. We have a NSM 1.2 release. Ed, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so most of this is copied from the agenda last time. Some of it is just a reminder that today is the feature freeze for the 1.2 release. We're not super pedantic, but I think, to the best of our awareness out of the issues PR meeting, the only sort of dangling thing is we have an example for the remote VLANs that needs to get merged in today. And I think other than that, we're pretty much on track for today being the feature freeze. If folks feel differently, if there's stuff that needs to be merged that hasn't been merged, please do speak up, because we do want to try and make sure that everybody's needs are getting met. The plan then is for to spend the next week beating on bugs and have a release candidate next week on February 1st, and then do our actual release on February 8th, on the theory that the release candidate gives folks a chance to beat on things for even more bugs, and then we would like to get as many of those fixed as we can for the actual release. Does that schedule make sense to folks? I think it's been the long-standing schedule of record for a while, but if anybody has any questions, comments, anything other than the remote VLAN stuff that they know of that we need to get in before we go to feature freeze, please speak up. Okay, and these are just some links to some of what's going into 1.2, or what was planned for 1.2. Now, we've essentially here gone with a bit of a feature-based release, or sorry, a time-based release rather than feature-based, in that there were some things that had to be pushed off into 1.3 that we were hoping to get into 1.2. Specifically, while policy-based routing got into 1.2, after some discussion with the folks who had asked for the ability to have multiple network service endpoints have overlapping use of IP space, That feature looks like has been bumped back to 1.3, and I think that folks were okay with that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. Delays happen, but they want to make sure everyone's going to be okay. Now, the last thing was on NSM 1.3, and the link here is a link to, we currently have a project board for 1.3, which mostly has whatever stuff was open that got shunted over from 1.2, so it's still in need of a little bit of grooming. But we want to start collecting the things that people want in 1.3. And when we discussed this last time, we were wanting to do about 60 days from NSM 1.2. Do we want to talk about specific dates at this time? Okay, so if we're doing our release on the 8th of February, then let's see, 8 weeks out from that, we put the next release on March 22nd, if we're doing roughly 8 weeks. So if we do a release on, sorry, these should all be 22. We do a release on the 22nd. If we step back a week from that for a release candidate, that would be and we discover that Ed actually can't operate a calendar very well. Let's see, that would be the 18th. And that would put on the 11th.
In your defense on the calendar, I can't operate them well either, apparently. So
does that match sort of the pattern in terms of feature freeze release candidate release? Does those feel reasonable for tentative dates for folks for 1.3?
Yeah, that feels reasonable to me. One of the questions as well is, is there anything, any known dates around this time period that we should be aware of that could, like national holidays or similar, that could derail this?
That's actually a good question, and especially an international project as we are, we've got people scattered all over everywhere, and everyone's got their own holidays. Do folks have anything that they're concerned about around the dates because of holidays and things of that nature?
Cool. Not hearing anything. So let's run with this as an initial set. And if we hear anything down the line that's urgent, then we can readjust them as necessary.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else that folks want to talk about on the 1.3 release at this time? Cool. So we've got check-in on policy-based routing. So there've been a request for policy-based routing. I wanted to draw attention to the fact that as sort of the last step in doing that, we have a policy-based routing example that's been merged into deployments K8s. And in particular, effectively, the way it ends up looking is that you end up getting a configuration. Please note, this is all very soft in that it's coming in the main.go. So if you wanted to provide the configuration some other way, that's totally up to you. But for the example, effectively, you can pick as a from an IP address that is matching the source IP on the interface. And then we've got the ability to handle things by proto, port, and provide routes, a list of routes, which are prefixes and next hops. Does that look roughly like what you were expecting?
I've seen your comment already, but just in briefly. So for me, it looks like yes. Is it something that we could even try out already?
That's actually the point of having the example. Yes, you can go try this example.
So it's an example, and then we can test it then.
Yeah, and and the thing is, and again, please note that the fact that it's being done with a config file. This is great for an example. This is fantastic for an example. I could imagine when building your own NSCs that you probably would want to handle this in some different way. The fact that we're using a config file is just something that's coming in the main.go currently. So, you can handle this however makes sense to you.
Okay. We will check it and try.
Yep, give it a try. See if it does roughly what you're looking for. And if not, let's get that figured out ASAP, and we'll treat it as a bug, and we'll get it fixed.
This config file, is it like a custom for a specific NSC, or will it be generic?
Oh, so this config file is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Artem, but I believe this config file is specific to the example NSC that we're using.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. One of the things we're trying to be careful about is if you're reading in config files or environment variables or other sorts of things like that, we're trying to deal with all of that up in the main.go and then actually pass proper objects into the chain elements and the chains. Because that way you could look at this and say, well, that's cute, but I don't want to do this with config files. I have a thing where I compute this myself.
So exactly, you want to put this in the reply message at the end. It should be the reply to the forwarder in the end of it. I mean.
It ends up being in the reply message in the end. Exactly. But again, my guess is in any real world example, you're going to need to do something more sophisticated than a config file. So this is basically just here for the purposes of being able to run the example. It was the easiest way to do examples.
Yeah, it's okay. I just want to know if you thought if you had some plan of like standardizing a config file that all NSCs should regard. I mean, is it thing?
Yeah, I don't know about that per se. It feels a little premature for standardization. And even if we did go in that direction, I would still want to have that live up in the main.go so that if somebody looked at our file and went, your file is stupid, I hate your format, I need to do something else.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
Yeah, but in time it could become some kind of de facto standard if everybody is copying it or something.
Oh, and de facto standard, again, as long as it's easy for people to deviate if they have other needs, I'm completely delighted to see that happen. I mean, in the case of this one, it is a little contrived because we got the from IP directly in it. And of course, that's going to need to match whatever the source IP issue is. So it happens to for this example. But
you did it from network here, didn't you? So anything from a network will match. Or do I interpret it wrong? You say /24. Should I like?
Yeah, that may be overinterpreted. We need to go take a look at that because it should be from a specific.
Yeah, then you should take it away.
Yeah, Artem, is this matching against the specific source IP or is it matching?
Yes, it is set as the source IP for NSM interface on the client.
So I guess the question is, what's the /24 mean here since it's just an IP address?
I think we need to check it in the chain element.
Okay, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and check that. We'll go ahead and check that. So, but anyway, that's
a nice feature, yeah. It would be a feature to have network matching as well. I mean, I can say anything from this network should be matching this policy. It's a policy route, and it can be a policy.
Well, again, the things we have to be very careful about is that it has to match the source IP. So if the source IP has the /24, I don't have any problem with this. But if the source IP, if the source IP is a /32, then we need to make sure we're disallowing something like this.
But you cannot know that, Ed. You cannot look at the header and know the network length of the IP address. So if you say /24, you actually mean network.
No. I understand. The point is we do have some checking, I believe, and there was in the spec, I need to go check to make sure it landed, that there was checking to make sure that if you set a from field in a policy route, it needed to be in your source IP, because you can't go kidnapping other people's traffic, right? With a policy route. You can only kidnap your own traffic. Does that make sense?
Not really for me, but it's not. I'm happy if it works and other people are happy with it. But sometimes when I want to be logical, I will question it. That's the thing.
Well, effectively, the logic on the from comes down to this, which is if I ask for a network service connection to your network service, and you give me back a source IP, and you give me back a policy route, the only valid from that is acceptable in that policy route is a from that involves the source IP that I was issued for that network service connection, for that vWire, because I can only apply policies to traffic, with a from address.
If you have a chaining service then and you want to do gateway stuff, then you can get any source address coming through.
No, but the point is you can't, because I can't let you kidnap, for example, traffic that should be going to the cluster.
No, but I'm setting up. Say that I'm setting up a combined NSE NSC. I'm an NSE, and then I get a lot of traffic in, and then I might want to have like a redirect route in that pod. No, I was just thinking if I make a pod as a gateway, then I could get into this kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, we should definitely talk a little bit more about that, because what we've got right now is that there's sort of two things that are in tension with each other, and tension is good. The first one is that we need to make sure that the system is safe, meaning that you're not going to be able to inappropriately kidnap other people's traffic.
But I will only get the traffic I will get anyhow. It's not other people's. If I'm a service or if I have something, how could I take other people's traffic?
Well, no. So basically, keep in mind the policy routes are being set primarily, effectively with the policy routes. You're setting the policy routes in relation to a particular network service connection, right?
But you do it in client pod, don't you? You don't do it in the kernel, more or less. I mean,
right. You do it in the pod, but the pod is one scope, and the network service mesh connection is another scope. The policy route applies to traffic that either is destined to or coming from that virtual wire. Right. So it's one thing to say if I get an incoming TCP connection on that virtual wire, right, which means that it's coming into that, and therefore the from field, the source IP that I send it out to will match the source IP for the incoming interface, right? In that case, apply any policy you like. It's a totally different thing to say. Good.
Okay. The other use case would be an application binding to the VIP address and originate traffic out. That would also go that way out if you have the source policy route.
Oh, and that would also work, yes. Yep.
Anyhow, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to know about the /24 and if it's
fine. No. These are good conversations because they drill into the specifics, and particularly when you get into policy-based routing, it can get a little bit arcane. And so it's good to drive into the specifics. Cool. Anything else? So go ahead and give the policy-based routing a try. Anything else that folks are interested in the policy-based routing?
We will give it a try.
Cool. Let me know how it goes. All right. So someone had added an issue here for NSM upgrade, which is always a fun topic.
Yes, this was glad. I brought this up a few weeks ago, maybe in November sometime, specifically that time NSM upgrade strategy, if you remember, and have discussed a bit about it already. Then on the first meeting this year, I gave a brief update what we were working on in the meantime. As I said, there were a few changes in our architecture and configuration since then. Now we are using Kubernetes registry instead of memory one. which improves the resilience during upgrade. Also, we changed the database backend for Spire. Instead of SQLite 3 local database, we introduced the PostgreSQL Server as the DB backend for it, which is also a step to the right direction related to resilience. However, Spire is not yet highly available in our environment because we bumped into problems when scaled it to 2 instances. Hopefully, we will successfully set it up without issues soon, and it will just make things better. So now I invited my colleague Richard, who presented our initial findings last year. Now he will present few slides about the upgrade testing, how and what we are doing, and the most important, the outcome of our tests, the figures. So Richie, please share the information with the community.
Yeah, this is exciting. Go ahead.
All right, hello. Well, I try to share my screen.
We can see.
All right,
Cool.
so I just briefly want to show you the setup that we're using right now. So yeah, initially we used only 3 workers. So the setup is the same for 3 workers that we're using and that you can see on the screen for 4. Basically what we want to try.
So right now I'm just seeing your title slide, NSM upgrade time improvement.
So you cannot see when I change to the next slide.
Yeah, the slide changing isn't happening, is I guess the point.
Yeah, somehow it started on the second one, but now we could see the first one only.
Yeah, this happens with some web browsers because what happens is the actual slideshow itself will.
Now I see the
we could see the third one.
Yep.
Now we are on the third one.
What can you see right now?
A bunch of measurements for time.
Yep.
Okay, then if I just go
now
out
we're
from
second. Now we're on the second one.
Good.
Now we're on second.
Don't touch it.
Now we're on second.
All right, then I'm not gonna go to full screen. All right, so
Don't touch it.
basically this is our setup right now that we're using like for workers. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to traffic test the internal parts of the network service mesh. So we're not trying to push traffic from the outside. We only want to see how the network service mesh systems behave during an upgrade. So that's why we're using network service endpoint as a traffic server and the network service clients as traffic clients. So initially, what we could see that on the timeline, the time span is like 5 minutes, and the upgrade like for the initialize phase and the time until the containers get ready and the pod gets really started and up to work, it take really very much time. And what was strange that the time, if you add up the initialize phase and the getting ready phase, it added up to like the multiplicants of 20, which was very strange.
That is strange.
That's where we came to the part that this can be due to the probes, especially for the readiness probe, as the period seconds was 20. So it was like constantly checking, but for like every 20 seconds. So that's why we decided that we should definitely lower this setting. And after lowering this setting, we came to really much improvement, as the 5-minute upgrade that it was before is now only 1 minute. And everything happens much faster.
Could you push a patch for that, please? That would be awesome to have a PR to change the settings.
Well, as far as I saw in your examples under the deployment cadence, you don't really set the probe, so maybe it's just running with the default probe. I'm not sure about that.
Okay,
but this is definitely a thing that you have to take care of, because this will definitely impact the system. So as you can see that this is really good. And down here, you can see the NSCs and the outage times. And it is really good to see that there is not a single point in a time where none of the NSCs are alive. So every time there is at least one NSC which can provide a service. So that's really, really great.
Oh, that is actually fantastic. So you're not actually, so what I think you're saying is that even though it takes you a minute to upgrade, you're not actually seeing outage as a result of upgrade.
Yeah, but it depends on how the system does the upgrade. As we will come to another example where, because of how we're using the tests right now, the traffic, like the NSE is a thing that is inside the cluster, and the forwarder can go down below that. And there can be scenarios when the NSE is not available, so we will see outage, but that will not be a real outage if you're using traffic from outside the cluster.
Okay.
So, but yeah, with the lowered readiness probe settings, there are still too many times sometimes when the getting ready state takes too much time. And we figured out that this could be because of the wait for it settings, how we're using it right now. So what we're using this wait for it for is that we use it as an init container for every network service mesh component. And we're just trying to avoid the unnecessary restarts of the NSM components because it cannot reach the Spire server. So we're using an init container to check whether the Spire server is alive, and we can start the container successfully. And initially this was set to 20 seconds again, and this would cause some delays in the start. Okay. So we lowered this too, and the results were like that. This is really went down for like every NSM component. So for an NSM GR, the total upgrade time is like 5 seconds, which is really great.
That is really, really great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is actually phenomenal. Here's the thing though that I really kind of want to drill into. So first of all, if you're comfortable sharing these slides, I would love it if you would link these slides into the meeting minutes, because this is really valuable information. The other one is I'd like to see if we can learn from some of what you're doing here, how to improve sort of the default behavior in the examples. So for example, you mentioned the wait for it to avoid restarts waiting for the Spire server to come up.
Yeah.
So maybe we just need to get more aggressive about not doing a restart when we can't reach the Spire server, for example, which probably would make this even more aggressive, because right now you're essentially doing a check every, you're essentially doing a check every 2 seconds.
Yes,
is that
and
correct?
then sleep 2 seconds after that, and then check for 2 seconds again, and
we could
continuously.
probably within the actual components do something even more aggressive trying to get to the Spire server, so that your wait for it would be unnecessary, but we could potentially get even better results.
Yeah, that would be really great.
Because I and this is actually one of the things that I want to be super clear about, which is like I admire the creativity in what you've done with wait for it, but we are super open to feedback like, hey, this seems to be slowing us down. Could we maybe change this about how we're restarting around Spire server unavailability, for example? So definitely feel free to bring those things up. In fact, what I'd kind of like to do is if you could attach these slides to the meeting minutes, I'd like to basically get some issues open and add you to those issues, primarily just as somebody who's been there, done that, and can comment on this, because I'm really excited about getting getting the upgrade down to 5 seconds. Starts to look a lot more like what I was hoping for, right? When you sort of said you got it down to a minute, well, okay, that's not horrendous, but 5 seconds is a lot closer to what I was hoping to see on upgrade. So that's very exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe I think that's all that I wanted to share.
Yeah. So let's.
I will attach the slides to the minutes of meeting.
Yeah, and if you could drop over Slack or somewhere else your GitHub ID, Richard, so we can get you attached to the issues we're opening around this, because getting some of these things in the examples sort of fixed for 1.3, and I would even be very interested in open to perhaps getting some upgrade testing going as part of the CI for 1.3, so that we are consistently testing upgrade of the system, just to make sure that we don't screw it up. Because the most annoying thing in the world is you finally get a thing working the way you want, and some unexpected thing breaks it in the next release. I hate that. Regressions suck. Which is why I only believe in things that are being tested in CI. So no, that's actually very, very exciting though. I appreciate you sharing that.
You're welcome.
Cool. Let me go ahead and share the meeting minutes again. All right, back to you, Frederick.
Okay. So with that, Is there anything else that we want to cover?
I think we have this last item here on NSM plus OpenTelemetry example, but I don't know who added it.
Oh, I have added it. For your information, last week we finished OpenTelemetry integration. OpenTelemetry is a collector of tools, APIs, and SDKs. In short, it collects and exports telemetry data for different collectors. And at this moment, you can deploy OpenTelemetry for your Kubernetes cluster and set up it for some specific collectors. For example, as in this example, you can use Jaeger for spans and Prometheus for metrics. And then NSM will be sent this telemetry information for those collectors.
Cool.
Yes. Also, if you play with this, then please let us know about any feedback. It's important for us. And also, if you're interested in this example, we also can schedule a demonstration next week.
Cool. That's something that would be interesting to see.
Okay.
Yes,
so,
I think so. Just a short question regarding to Jaeger. Previously, I've tried it out, but I found that the simplest example how Jaeger could be installed was broken that time. Have you changed? I mean, are you still using that example, and is it fixed, or we need to find something out?
As I know, it's probably changed, but not super hard. You will need only to add OpenTelemetry collector for your cluster and set up a Jaeger cluster. And can you please follow the link?
Sure.
Okay.
And here we have OpenTelemetry folder. And here we have a collector YAML file. This file just set up is just set up. I think we need to find configuration. Can you please scroll up a bit?
Sure.
Yes, that's it. This is default OpenTelemetry configuration, and here you can just describe your telemetry services. In this case, is using Jaeger for spans and Prometheus for metrics.
Okay, I will give it a try. And another question: is there any way to configure not to report the spans in the logs, because it's always exalting all the logs?
I think it's related to deployments configuration. Yes, it can be disabled. You need only to change log level variable.
Yeah, so if I recall correctly, basically, so if you look, for example, let's look at forwarder VPP as an example. If you look at the forwarder YAML, we are setting some environment variables, and one of the environment variables is setting the log level to trace. The default log level, I think, is info or something that's very innocuous, that would give you very little in your logs. Now, the reason we sort of set it to trace here as the default is we're running these as tests as well. And so if you were simply just to remove the setting of the log level entirely, I believe you would default, and let me just go check this to be sure. I believe the default value for that environment variable is going to be info. So log level, yeah, defaults to info, which is quite reasonable usually. And in fact, it's sparse because generally speaking, you're absolutely right. You don't want your logs to be flooded out most of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for raising that, because that is absolutely a thing. The other thing that you're going to want that's actually true about that as well is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we are not set, if the log level is set to info, we are not also outputting the internal spans to Jaeger. Is that correct? Denise?
I guess if we'll change log level, then all telemetry information will be sent to collectors. So my guess that it just disable logs for application, but all telemetry stuff should be.
We probably want to look into defaulting, not necessarily in the examples, but defaulting to not sending the internal spans, because they're fantastic if you're debugging things. But anyway, we can take that conversation offline.
Yep.
Cool. Oh, one other question, Richard. In the case where you got the restart down to 5 seconds, were you seeing outages from the NSCs?
Well, it depends. As I said, the thing that we have the traffic server running on the NSC, which is inside the cluster, it will be affected by the upgrade. So
okay.
yeah, we're working on some kind of a different way or an improved way to measure the outage, but that's still in progress.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, when you're talking about running traffic clients and traffic servers for measuring traffic, what are you using to generate that traffic?
Yeah, we're using a tool called seed traffic.
Okay, interesting. That's what I hadn't heard of. I'm familiar with iPerf. I'm familiar with T-Rex. I've not heard of seed traffic. I'll have to go look into it. Cool. All right then. Anything else that folks have this?
Just one small thing from my side. Last week we discussed about the backward compatibility issues, and I put the exact GitHub commit into the agenda to that point.
Ah, okay. Thank you. I had not actually gone back and seen that. Let's take a quick look. Okay.
Yeah.
And this went from returning the network service to network service response. Let me see what else was going on here. That's when we switched to bool deleted. Okay, I can see that. And I think one of the things that I had suggested that I should probably go do is check to see if we had other bear return types, because the problem with bear return types is network service has its own semantic meaning, and that's why we had to expand it here so we could add a deleted flag in addition to the network service endpoint. I should take a look and see if we have any other sort of bear returns in the API that look like that we may want to strategically and intentionally change in 1.3, just so that we never have to change them in breaking ways again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for putting this commit into the meeting minutes. That helps tremendously. Cool. Anything else today? All right, I will talk to you all next week. Thank you.